Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Pakistan Dreaming 2023. I say welcome to Pakistan Dreaming. Most of you have already been there and enjoying the sessions, but at least welcome to this session. Before I get started, though, I do want to thank our sponsors, the Trailblazer community for one, PDF Butler, and all the other sponsors we've got for Pakistan Dreaming this year, because without the sponsors, this kind of event wouldn't be possible. So let's quickly introduce the event before this session before we get stuck in. So this session is OCR capabilities through AWS in Salesforce. Um, we're going to be looking at extracting text from documents, but it could be anything from documents, images, etc. And we'll be looking at the architectures today. I'm your host for this session. My name's Jonathan Fox, for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure to meet. I am a 28 times certified system and application architect within the Salesforce world. I've been lucky enough to get experience with AWS, hence this session, and I am certified in AWS. I'm a Golden Hoodie recipient, a British Army veteran, um, and that also obviously means I am a military trailblazer. Um, if you go ahead and scan that QR code, hopefully that QR code works. You will be able to access my Linktree account page, and you'll be able to connect with me on all the various different socials. More specifically, X and LinkedIn is where I'm active. So if you do want to reach out to me at any point after this, feel free to contact me via the links through that QR code. So without further ado, on to the session. So the session today, it's going to be relatively high level, and we're going to be looking more at the architect track than anything else. Um, we'll cover a bit of an intro. So what is OCR? What are the technologies that we're going to be using? And having a look at those various technologies. Um, we'll be diving into the technologies a little bit more, figuring out what they exactly do, and why have I chosen these for this session and picked them to hone in on and try and build this functionality out for us. We'll look at the architecture, how you would go about using these technologies all together, how you would architect the solution um, to achieve this feature functionality within your Salesforce org. And then I have got a few resources to share with you if you want to learn more. Um, those obviously are links, so if you want, I can share them on socials afterwards, or if you want access to this deck, I'm sure I can share this deck with you and you can have access to those links to learn more and obviously click on those resources. And then finally, just some closing thoughts about what we've learned, a bit of a summary and a bit about how we should be focusing on well-architectured framework and making sure that our solutions are well-architected. So we've talked about it, mentioned it already. What is OCR? Now, I'm going to keep this relatively high level, relatively fluid, because we only have half an hour for this session. So, but to get started, we need to understand what is OCR before we even can understand what this session is all about. So, OCR. OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. Now, I'm not going to read verbatim what's on the screen there. That's for all of you to be able to see and read. But effectively, what we want to achieve is OCR is a technology that can take an image, a Word document, a PDF, and extract the text. It can recognize text. That could even be, not even just a PDF created from a Word document. That could be like somebody has scanned in a document. I mean, who uses scanners these days? But it still happens, especially in the UK. It definitely does. I don't know about anywhere else in the world, but there are things where government agencies still take paper-based documents, scan them in, and upload them to electronic systems as PDFs. So If we want to effectively capture the text from those scanned in documents, those created digital documents, and not have to manually read them, manually extract them, OCR is our best friend in this situation. Now, as I say, it could be an image, it could be anything else. Electronic document, optical character recognition. So why? I mean, I touched on it ever so slightly, didn't I, actually, when I was explaining what OCR is, but why do you want OCR within your organization? Why do you need it? Um, why can't we just look at the documents, scan through it, find that account number or find that billing address? Because it isn't efficient. And that's the first one there, efficiency. And those of you who have delved a bit into the Salesforce well architecture framework, and obviously this is our AWS well architecture framework and lots of others, you will see that automation and efficiency are principles or pillars in some cases to a well architected framework. Now, automating the extraction of data from that scanned or even that physical document that is, uploaded electronically will significantly reduce that manual data entry, leading to, faster operations, but more importantly, minimizing human error. It's easy to extract an account number from a document, a PDF, and accidentally hit a zero instead of a one. And that could mean a huge difference. That could be the difference between sending an order to one address and one account versus sending it somewhere else. Now, cost saving, obviously, we need to think about costs in all of our solutions. And actually, by reducing manual data entry, not only do we save time, but we reduce the costs associated with that human resource. And it actually means that we can use that human resource rather than not, we're not talking about replacing people here. We're actually talking about using them for more valuable tasks, using humans for things that need a human rather than using them for monotonous tasks like data extraction from a document. And we can use them for something much more valuable. So not only are we cost saving by taking a human out of that monotonous, tedious loop, we're actually using the human for something more valuable, gaining twice there in terms of cost. Now, enhanced customer experience, customer facing roles, you know, service agents, salespeople, it can obviously lead to faster data processing here, which ultimately means faster response times, especially when it comes to service, for example. But it counts for sales as well. And that means a better user experience. Data accuracy, we've mentioned, it means we're reducing that discrepancy in manual data entry. Regulatory compliance, if we can actually extract the data and save it somewhere, we can then audit it. We can then, it's digitized, it's structured and stored. We can actually meet regulatory requirements better. And of course, not everything is in English. We have multi-language support when it comes to OCR. So let's have a look at some technologies. Let's jump into this. What we're thinking when we're looking at trying to achieve OCR in Salesforce is three technologies here. Two of them you need, one of them you do if you want to enhance the capabilities. And we're looking at AWS for the OCR capabilities, but Salesforce for actually utilizing them. So Apex and Lightning Web Components, obviously for your Salesforce side of things. And then we're looking at AWS Textract for basic extraction of text, or then perhaps SageMaker and Comprehend for a little bit more complex scenarios. Let's jump into those a little bit more. So, Apex and Lightning Web Components. This should be most people on the call, on the sessions, bread and butter. But it's still important that we go over it. So, where would Lightning Web Components and Apex fit into OCR capabilities within Salesforce? Well, as you're aware, Salesforce's proprietary language, Apex, allows you to execute transaction controls, um, programmatic business flow through code, and as many of you aware, it's akin to Java, um, like languages, it's object-oriented programming language. It allows us to create that bespoke functionality that maybe doesn't exist through declarative means within Salesforce, through programmatic methods. We need that. We need that because in a moment I'll explain, but we need that because we need a way to execute, process, and trigger our OCR capabilities. We also need Lightning Web Components. Now, obviously, you could use Visualforce, you could use Aura components, but we, typically being more modern, we should be using Lightning Web Components. So I haven't touched on those. We're talking about Lightning Web Components here. It's a modern framework for building those front-end components, those web components that you either surface in the Salesforce platform to your internal users or on an Experience Cloud site to your external users. Either way, Lightning Web Components, your modern web standards to be able to create that user interface and probably a dynamic user interface within Salesforce where out-of-the-box components don't quite live up to the mark. Now, OCR capability, you need that document. You need that document to be able to actually extract anything out of it. So we need a document upload. This is the standard document upload in Salesforce where you can upload directly to a record, of course. And in that scenario, you'd have to start building some triggers in to catch the record before, or maybe process afterwards, the document, and then send it to AWS for processing. Now, that doesn't quite work sometimes if you need to generate that information on the fly or extract that information on the fly. So in this scenario, you might imagine it's an Experience Cloud user uploading a file to your within your flow or something like that, and registration. And rather than asynchronously having to upload it, save it, come back later after it's processed, in this scenario, they're uploading it because the information is being automatically extracted to help populate some of that registration form for parts. So we need Apex to handle that server-side logic when the document's uploaded, extract that document, maybe encode it, send it to AWS through the likes of, using HTTP requests, which we'll get on in a minute, but actually just in this instance, just capturing it and holding the data of the document in Apex. But we would definitely need Lightning Web Components to make that user-friendly interface, where they can upload that document. And that might, include standard components of the Salesforce, that we are provided with, that we can use in our LWC, such as the drag and drop interface that you get when you use a Lightning file uploader. But you might want to include some progress indicators and some other confirmation messages, explaining that this information, the document, is going to be used in OCR capabilities to help progress them through this next process, maybe this registration. Now, I mentioned a second ago, sending the document to AWS for processing. You need Apex to do that. You're going to use Apex to make a call out to your AWS services. And that might include storing the document temporarily in Salesforce, or maybe storing it temporarily within something like AWS, like S3, for example, as a holding area, depending on if you want to process synchronously or asynchronously, depending on your use case. You might store the document first in Salesforce. You might send it off to AWS first for processing and actually not need to store the document. Perhaps that's a regulatory requirement. You don't actually store the document, you're just using it for extracting information. Who knows? It depends on your business case. But either way, you need Apex to either store it or send it straight away for storage. The next step would absolutely be using HTTP requests to interact with the AWS to send that document to the service. Now, you might use an intermediary like MuleSoft, or you might even just use an intermediary like an AWS API gateway, because this might be a customer-facing service. This might not just be for your internal usage. You're going to handle your errors gracefully, and you're going to provide feedback to the user back in that LWC to say what the status of the processing is. You're going to then have AWS do the processing. We're going to have a look at that in a second. You can see that on the sequence diagram there. And you will then get back a response from AWS. with the parsed data, probably in something like a JSON format, and you would then store that information for your usage. That is done within Apex. If it's synchronous, you get a response from the HTTP request. If it's asynchronous, you might have a callback. You might use something like webhooks. Who knows on your business process here? But either way, you're using Apex to handle the response of whatever the processing took place on AWS. And then finally, again, you're going to use the LWC as your user-friendly format to provide the um, the visual of the response of whatever took place. So again, in this whole process, you're using LWC for user interactions, Apex for processing. Now, what we did there, though, was we missed out that whole AWS side of things. What happens on the AWS side of things? Well, that's where our first technology on AWS comes into play, and that's Textract. And Textract is an AWS, Amazon Textract. It's an AWS Amazon fully managed machine learning service that automatically extracts that text or handwriting or data from scanned documents for us. It is not like a traditional OCR system, though, because they only extract text. Textracts can understand the layout of a document. So actually, Textract has a little bit of extra capability. It can understand and identify tables, forms, and other structures on document, which is why I've included it in today's session, because I think it's quite a powerful tool. And because Textract is an AWS service, it's one of the leading cloud providers out there. And as you start listening to this and probably listen to some of the other sessions, especially look at some of the things that Salesforce are telling us, AWS is becoming more and more part of the Salesforce platform. More specifically, it's the hosting platform for Hyperforce. So we can see that AWS is absolutely a leading cloud service provider here. We also see that when it comes to um, the GPT capabilities within Salesforce that are going to be rolled out, AI Cloud or whatever they're going to call it, SageMaker is obviously a big player in that space, and that's where Amazon AWS comes into play. Now, the benefits of Textract, you get accuracy because Textract can differentiate between columns and headers and footers and the main content. So you can make sure that text is extracted with context and clarity. And that's one of the benefits that I mentioned a moment ago. It can understand and identify structures within a document. It's scalable because whether you're processing 10 documents or 10,000, it scales. It's a serverless platform. AWS manages the scalability for you, so you don't have to. It's cost effective because you only pay for what you use. And that's one of the benefits of using a provider such as Amazon, such as AWS, because a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of the services are pay only for what you use. So that could be, not always, but could be a cost saving, a cost effective capability. And then integration within the AWS ecosystem. Because Textract is an AWS service, it means that should you want to use other AWS services, such as SageMaker, Comprehend, or even just S3 for storage, it's a lot easier to integrate those services because it's all on the same platform. Now, the process flow you can see here is we talked about how we use Apex and LWC to capture the document and send it. You would send it to Textract, and Textract would use that document to process and break down all of the text and the structures into a JSON format. As you can see, a really basic example on the screen there in the middle, which would be sent back to Salesforce. Now, that's great. It's extracted a document, it's looked at the document, a scanned in document, it could be a big PDF with lots of tables and things like that, and it's broken it down into a JSON format for you to handle in your Apex. Now, that's all well and good if it's a structured document, and it's the same type of document you're going to have every single time. You know that it's going to be in this format every single time. You can parse that JSON because you know that JSON's format every single time. But what happens if it's not the same type of document every single time? Or what happens if the structure changes dynamically between documents that people upload? You can't build your Apex to always look for a particular block type in that JSON because it might not be there if it's a different type of document. Now, that's where Textract falls short a little bit for our OCR capabilities, and where we would actually look to use something perhaps like Comprehend or SageMaker. Now, you may have heard of SageMaker, and mentioned it a moment ago. SageMaker is that machine learning platform for AWS that Salesforce is recommending when it comes to the AI capabilities recently announced. One of, obviously, there's things like the Google Cloud platforms. I think it's Vertex, and there's others out there, but SageMaker is one of the big ones that is mentioned. So as we look to enhance our OCR capabilities, we start looking at things like Comprehend and SageMaker. Now, SageMaker is that service that allows you to build, train, and deploy your own machine learning models. But unlike your traditional ones where you're limited to the predefined models, SageMaker allows you to tailor your own machine learning solutions to fit your business needs. So, for instance, if you have a specialized format in your invoices or a unique identifier that isn't common, SageMaker can be trained to recognize those and extract them with more high precision. And that's what we might be wanting to look at when it comes to non-structured documents or non-standardized documents, but at least we know what those documents are supposed to be. On the other hand, Comprehend, and Comprehend is mentioned here because Comprehend is a natural language processing service on AWS that uses machine learning to find insights and relationships in text. And it comes with pre-trained models that can recognize entities such as commercial items and dates, and in our case, maybe account numbers and order details. So if you're looking to quickly deploy a solution without much customization, Comprehend could be a good fit because you can send the document not knowing the structure. So again, it might be that community users upload a document. You have no idea what that document is, what the structure it is. It could be a an invoice in one sense. It could be a passport for extracting, identity verification. Or it might be a passport that you've never come across from a country that you don't really know. So you don't know what the structure is. You could use it. You could use Comprehend to use its natural language processing to break that document down, and actually you ask it to find bits of information rather than telling it the structure and retrieving a set structure. So it's a bit more flexible as Comprehend. It's a bit more akin to something like you're sending data to ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT to find the information out of a data set, for example. Comprehend is a little bit more similar to something like that, rather than you having to have structure and repetitive kind of scenarios where you know what to expect and what you're going to get back. So we have Textract structure, always the same. You're going to get back a block of JSON that you know how to handle. SageMaker, bit more flexibility. You can train it, and it doesn't have to necessarily be the same every time, but you need something to train it on, and then Comprehend is your full flexibility there. So how would that look as a whole for our solution, our OCR feature on the Salesforce from an architectural level? How do we tie it all together? The architecture, you can see there our Salesforce platform. We have our AWS account. And you probably pretty much guessed how this will look, and how it will play. Well, effectively, you've got your Lightning Web Component, as we've mentioned, that handles that input, that user interface. You've got your Apex that handles the processing, the contextual flow on the Salesforce platform, and sends the information base64 over to AWS. Now on AWS, you've got your AWS account, and in a specific region, you will have your capabilities, your services. You'll need something. You may have an AWS gateway, API gateway. In this case, I've left it out. You don't necessarily need it, but you'll have Lambda. And Lambda is what you are going to call directly from Salesforce. Perhaps you might have MuleSoft, anything else in between for your architectures in terms of API structure, but really bare basic. You're going to reach out eventually to Lambda and pass that base64 of the file to Lambda So Lambda's serverless compute service can start to process. Does it need to store it in S3? Does it need to call SageMaker, Textract, Comprehend, depending on which type of solution you go down? Lambda then obviously will send it to Textract, Comprehend, SageMaker to process your document, and then it will send it back to Apex. Now, what you have here is primarily scalability and security. You have efficiency at scale because all of these services here are serverless capabilities on AWS, which means that should you scale up, should you encounter a high volume of traffic, these services will automatically scale for us, meaning that we don't have to worry about scaling up or scaling out of our own servers, and making sure that our machine learning can handle that volume of data. What we also have is a commitment to security here, because with it being on a cloud service provider platform such as AWS, we can manage security very granular, which means we can make sure that people's documents are saved and secure. Nobody gets access to them unless they should have access to them, and the results of the processing are only used for what we decide to use them for. If we want to use them and we agree to use them for processing and learning, then great. If we don't, we can control that. Similarly, if we want to store the data, the document on AWS, then great, but we can restrict who has access to it. So the security aspect of both the Salesforce platform, as we know, is a very secure platform if we make sure our things such as profiles, permission sets, sharing and visibility as a whole is tailored correctly, combined with the granular security customization we can do on AWS. We have got a very secure platform and service here. And as I say, scalability, we don't need to worry about. It's serverless. These technologies here are serverless, and we can scale up and out should we need to. So as we're coming to the end of the session, we need to think about how can we learn more? How can we look at this in more detail if we want to, and actually start building even a proof of concept. Maybe we want to have a look at sharing this with our business and showing them that it's possible and capable. Maybe we're already using AWS and we want to show how we can start using Textract, Comprehend, or SageMaker with our Salesforce solution, and start utilizing some of our other AWS services and make a really robust solution for our business, or maybe even for our customers and clients. Now, there are some really great documentation, developer guides and documentation for for all three, SageMaker, Textract, and Comprehend, where you can go and have a look at how to call those APIs, how to set those services up, and what to expect in terms of responses from those services and how they actually work. Serverless architectures with AWS Lambda. Now, I only talked about Lambda ever so quickly. You need to have a processing layer on AWS. Lambda is a really good option because it's serverless. So if you want to learn more about Lambda and how you can utilize Lambda, and there's a plethora of information there, white papers, case studies, even webinars, because Lambda's great. Code in Java, code in JavaScript, code in Python. Now, training and certification in CloudQuest, two things there. If you want to learn more just about how to be an effective solution architect on AWS, developer, security subject matter expert on AWS, go and have a look at AWS training certification. It's not as quirky as Trailhead, but it's definitely got some great learning, great material on there. And AWS CloudQuest is a game. It's a role-playing game where you walk around as a character, but you actually solve and build on AWS at the same time. It's so cool as AWS CloudQuest. But you can learn a lot about all of these technologies that I've talked about today because they're available in CloudQuest to play with and to build proof of concepts with. So let's have a think about our closing thoughts, our final remarks, as we've got about 30 seconds left of this session. What we have done today is in our rapidly evolving digital landscape, we've looked at leveraging tools such as AWS and Salesforce, not just as an option, but imperatively for our businesses to make use of natural language processing, machine learning, AI in general, and serverless compute, all real things, all big key players in the technology space. And we're using that intelligently with agility and scalability at its core. Thank you everyone for your time, your appreciation listening to this session today, and I hope you have a great rest of Pakistan Dreaming. Any questions you want to ask me, reach out to me, but I appreciate your time today. Thank you everyone.